my work really does deal a lot with the body, with the female form, and with the female form in some type of space that it inhabits. My work is very much centered around my everyday. It's centered around the things that I see around me every day. I was trying to create new typologies of veiling, like the Muslim ideas about veiling. And it's interesting because there's so many Muslims that exist in the world, but every single culture has a different methodology of veiling. If you look at Somali women, if you look at Malaysian women, if you look at Bangladeshi women, like they all have a different methodology of veiling. And I think it's also really interesting how these are so curated and unique to the specific um, geographic regions, because it's interesting because um there's no written tools around how we should veil. There is no definitive transcript of how you should veil the body. So for me, I was proposing kind of new ideas of veiling, and I was really kind of looking at, yes, this like fine line between what we consider acceptable and what we are allowed to kind of create in a way. So before, when I would put on this garment and I would go out to film myself, I would just be just sitting at my house, just completely anxious, panicking. And then I would put it on. And then once I would go outside, I think it was completely different, because once I was outside, people at first from a distance, they would not understand what it is that I'm wearing. People would ask me like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you sick? Are you obese? Are you a man or a woman?" Like, I think people were just genuinely very curious about what it is that I was doing. Like, I think in their mind, they hadn't perceived it as such. It was only when I saw other hijabi women that were next to me, and then they came up to me and they would ask me like, what are you doing, what's going on, what are you wearing? And then I would tell them like, you're covered up, I am also covered up, it's just my version of covering up. And then they were very like understanding of it. New methodologies of existence are being introduced. So now I see with social media and the younger generation, like I think they, especially like the women in the younger generation, they have been somewhat conditioned to perceive themselves in a specific way. And I think I am truly really interested in reshaping the female body as just to the basis of its biological utilities, like truly just accepting body neutrality. And I think the pieces that I've made exist as a way to start that conversation. But I wish more people would really sit down and critically engage with some of these things that I'm creating. I think that's, especially with the body as a site, I think the pieces that I made are visually very kind of jarring and comical almost, to an effect. And I think because of the way that everything's kind of structured around in the digital landscape that we exist in, people might not want to critically engage with it in a way and just really understand that, like, okay, what does this mean when you deform a human body past, just like the way that it's supposed to exist, that we so often see on social media, like where it's someone who's very skinny or who's very curvy or very voluptuous. Even in Bangladesh, like I've seen kind of more of a change, especially in the younger generation, with the people that I've conversed with, that they have started denouncing ideas that we have been fed, about specific binaries in the past. And people really are willing to kind of just like exist and take on newer ways of expression and newer modes of expression, which I think is truly really exciting. I can objectively understand that the reason men are situated in or celebrated in a specific way is because they are the ones that are ultimately allowed to call the shots. Like they are the ones that do the hiring, they're the ones that do the picking, they are the ones that do the curating. So I think it always ends up in a system where they pick people like that they are like. So men end up giving other men more opportunities. But I think, especially now with this visual space that we have entered because of social media, like we see women as kind of being more at the center stage. Like even if we're talking about just musicians that are more celebrated now, like I think women now more than ever will have the time to really call the shots. And I think being a woman artist in this day and age, it just will allow it will just continue to get progressively better for women. Looking at modes of protection for the singular self. And I think when I say modes of protection, I do mean it in a state of just like protecting oneself from a police state, um, protecting oneself from modes of aggression, from war, from colonialism, from yeah, from things that are threatening. Um, and how can we then create things and objects that we can then keep in our closet or keep in our garden shed or under the fold and keep under the bed. Modes of production, that is very simple for people to, we create like a very specific guideline of telling people like, hey, you can use these everyday items to quickly create something that allows you to float and escape this space of tension. Hey, you can use these everyday household items to then create some type of body armor that if you have to go out and protect yourself in acts of resistance and acts of protest, you can do that. I'm venturing into sculptures. I'm not going to say too much, but I'm working on a show in 2026 where I'm going to have kind of like life-size sculptures. These will be my first kind of large installation pieces. And I am uh, working with an American artist, Mark Wilson. He's also a sculptor, he makes sculptures. And we are going to be researching the shipbreaking yard in Bangladesh, and we're going to be investigating the ship building yards in Virginia, US, because Mark is from Virginia and I'm from Bangladesh. So we are kind of um, we're both researching both ends of how the life cycle of a ship is made, especially an American military ship, and how ships find their demise in Bangladesh and the process that it goes through, and in interrogating kind of like the differences in the labor conditions of how these ships are being produced and then broken down in America versus in Bangladesh. Yeah, and the specific relationship between Bangladesh and America, like how these two places might seem so distant. There is kind of a lot, like, I mean, just with the whole global landscape, everything is so interconnected. But it's just, it would be really interesting to kind of visualize that and immortalize that and document that process.